Righto, tally ho there champs and welcome to the show. Today I'm reviewing the awesome ASUS ROG Gaming Strix RX 580 graphics card. And if you don't know, the RX 580 is just basically a minor update on the RX 480, still based on Polaris 20. Has 2,304 cores. The stock RX 480 1340 megahertz, and this OC Strix version here has a overclock mode of 13,060. So it has a modest overclock there. This one here comes with 8GB RAM, 256-bit memory architecture, and I guess, yes, it is a slightly faster version of the RX 480. But the main thing here is this is using 185 watts. So they've got rid of that problem where the RX 480 was drawing too much power from the PCI Express slot. This thing has redefined what I think is a cool card. And what I mean by cool is how cool it operates. I mean, I've had to redefine what I think a good operating temperature is, because this thing here, I'll get to it later, but it barely cracks 60 degrees. And if I go back to the RX 480, 75 degrees was not unusual. And this Strix card here has just redefined what I think is. It's all down to this awesome heatsink this thing has. Thickest pipes in the business there. You're getting 2 times the contact for improved thermal transfer. Of course, it uses the patented wing blade, IP5X certified fans, super quiet. These things are legendary, these fans on these. And that heatsink combined with these fans here, just, yeah, it's a game, and not even reach 60 degrees under load. And most of the time, in the low 50s, game changer. Like, I've never had graphics cards that are like that. I've reviewed the 1080 Ti Strix, basically the same heatsink and the same thing with that graphics card. Super cool. The best heatsinks in the business. Now, also with the Strix, you pay a little bit more, but when you see the quality of the heatsink, how big this card is, it's a big card, but you can see the quality that's gone into that heatsink, and you'll realize where the money has gone. The industry's only 100% automated auto extreme technology. That means put together by machine. That means the card's going to be much more reliable, and also you're less likely to get the dreaded coil whine and stuff like that. Now, pricing, I'm not even going to talk about pricing. I think they go for around, now in America, about $290 US, in Australia about $430. That's if you can get. It is so hard to get a Strix card at the moment. They're the graphics card most people want. They just sell like instantly, these Strix cards. So those prices there, they will drop eventually. Supply and demand, simple supply and demand. Now basically you'll say an RX 580 is a 1440p gamer. It smashes anything 1080p, but this graphics card can actually game at 4K. On the front there you have those 3 patented fans surrounded by a plastic shroud, matte black shroud, has RGB lighting that you can control with the Aura software. On the back you have a matte black aluminium backing plate there. It's very classy, has some sort of graphic design on it, looks pretty cool, and also has the ROG logo there, which is also RGB, and you can control with the Aura software. But moving on to the front end of the card here, this is where things get interesting, and it has 2 4-pin fan headers there, so you can control your case fans using the ASUS software. Once the GPU reaches a certain temperature, you can start cranking on the case fans. But in all honesty, I don't think you'd ever need that, because it runs like in the low 50s most of the time. But it's great that it's there anyway. And on the I/O front, you have DVI port, 2 HDMI 2.0 ports, and 2 display ports. So you're covered for VR there. I guess you want to know how it performs. Now at the end of this video, I'll show you playing GTA 5 with this card, and I'll have all the telemetry on the top left hand corner, temperature, frames per second. You want to check that out so you can see in real time how it performs. But you'll see it never really cracks over 55 degrees. So if you're looking at a Firestrike score of 11,076, now when I overclocked it, I could get about a 60 megahertz overclock, and the boost clock would get to like 1460, and I could get an extra 200 points there on the Firestrike score. But 200 points difference in Firestrike, is that worth it? I mean, they really do get the most out of it. ASUS, they've got to be commended for their overclocking of this. Unigine Heaven, 1080p high settings, you're getting a whopping 117.5 frames per second and a score of 2,959. Time Spy, 4,239. And when we get into gaming, as I said here, I would say this is a 1440p card, smashes anything 1080p, but it can game 4K. For example, GTA 5 on the default settings, 4K, which is high and very high, I was getting 45 frames per second. Now, if I just drop a couple of settings, like turn a couple of the settings, I was able to get 60 frames per second, 4K. fantastic. So this thing can game at 4K. But if you want to just use it at 1440p GTA 5, high settings and very high settings, 87 frames per second. Battlefield 1 was another game I could play at 4K. 4K high settings, I was getting 42 frames per second, but I dropped that down to medium and I was able to get 54 frames per second. So that's playable at 4K. Now you're more likely to use this at 1440p, and at 1440p Battlefield 1 high settings, 79 frames per second. Now I won't be able to play every game at 4K. Games like Crisis and DSX Mankind Divided, they're best played at 1440p. DSX Mankind Divided, 1440p high settings, you're getting around 52 frames per second. And on Crisis 3 high settings, 1440p, you're getting bang on 60 frames per second. It was actually 59.65. So this thing can game, smashes anything 1080p. It's really best at 1440p, where you'll be getting in excess of 60 frames per second, most titles there. And you can even game at 4K if you just play with the settings a bit on games like Battlefield, GTA 5. So if you're going to get an RX 580, you might as well get the best one. This is the best. I mean, you're talking about temperatures in the low 50s. Amazing, super quiet, even when the fans come on, because it's not that hot. It sounds like the graphics card is idling, so sound is not an issue. And I guess this market segment here is the most popular for graphics cards, the 1060 or the RX 580. Which one would you choose between the two? Well, I guess that's up to you. The RX 580s do work well in DX12, but whichever way you go, I do recommend you spend that little bit of extra money and you get the Strix version, because that's the best. And having a graphics card that runs in the low 50 degrees, game changing. So now I'm going to be playing GTA 5. Now I'm playing this game at 4K. I've just lowered a couple of settings to normal, so it's a mixture of normal and high settings. Still looks fantastic. If this video was helpful, give me a thumbs up there. If you're new around here, why not subscribe? I've got lots more tech content coming soon, and until next time guys, tally ho. So once this scene is finished here, you'll see the frames drop. That happens with every graphics card. I don't know why, but it just does. But still, 4K, high settings, a couple of normal settings there. Amazing. 4K, 60 frames per second. Awesome. Now today the frame rates have decided not to drop. It's still pulling that 60 frames per second, so I don't know why, whatever. Okay, so there you see, constant 60 frames per second, 4K, high, and a couple of normal settings in there. What more can you want from a graphics card that's like just over $200 US, about 250 US? Oh yeah! And yeah, the temperatures, what, did they get into the 60s? That's about it. Big deal.